with us today. We're a board of 4 county commissioners today. Vice Chair Trigger is in Washington, D.C. on county business. Moving down to emergency business. Any emergency business today, Steve? Mr. Mark-Ricey? No. All right. The board? Not seeing any, then we'll move directly into public comments. For public comments, you'll be given 3 minutes. If you're in Harris Hall, please step to the mic, and once you get to the mic, you'll notice a clock on the wall. Keep an eye on the clock. It's a 3-minute countdown. There'll be an audible warning at about 30 seconds, asking you to summarize within 30 seconds. After that, we'll move along to the next speaker. Following the speakers who are present in Harris Hall, Ms. Jones will conduct the queue for the people who may be signed up online, subsequent to which I'll ask if anyone else in Harris Hall wishes to speak. When you step to the mic, please state your name for the record, and any written comment, please turn them in today or for next week's, to be included in next week's record. Or if you have written comments prior to the meeting, please turn them in at any time prior to this meeting, which is too late now, by the way. So with that, we'll begin the in-house queue. We'll start with Dan Dessler, who will be followed by Steve Buss. Good morning, Ms. Dessler.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Dan Dessler. I'm retired for 15 years. Was coined the builder-developer with a community conscience back when we developed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in Oregon, the Atrium Churchill Village Garden Apartments. And my last project was Good Neighbor Care Center, which is now Elder Care, a pioneering effort in long-term care for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. We pioneered the development of assisted living through a cooperative effort between the entrepreneurial community, of which I was part of, government at both the local level, the state level, and the federal level, by getting an A and B waiver to the Medicaid program to solve the growing problem of providing affordable long-term care for the elderly. Through that partnership, taking the entrepreneurial private sector, combining it with the assistance that government gave, we created what is now the choice for long-term care in the United States of America, and it started right here in Lane County in Oregon, and we should be very proud of that. It's a cooperative effort. Housing and care need service and a lack of service models in the industry right now. We have the elderly, the persons with disabilities, misguided and teens, single moms, and a homeless population, all of which we are concerned about. I'd like to suggest that we have an avenue of opportunity, that we can be part of the solution. We have 2 choices: to be part of the solution or part of the problem. The county has assets in terms of land and housing that can be integrated with the entrepreneurial spirit and the private sector to solve these problems. Right now, assisted living has approached a cost of around $4,900 a month. 20 years ago, our low level of care was $800. I've been working for the last 4 years at creating a new model that I personally believe will change the way people pay for health care.
30 seconds.
Bottom line, a cooperative effort. It's government, it's entrepreneurial, and the community service sectors that can come together and solve these problems. We have to stay at the table, create the win-win. The win-win is where everybody stays at that table until they get the blue ribbon, and I believe it's there. I can't run with the torch at my age, but I can certainly help light it. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dessler. Next is Steve Buss, who is the last person signed up in Harris Hall.
Good morning. My name is Steve Buss. I live in Eugene, and I'm here today representing Cottages of Hope. It's a new collaborative effort that was built on some holiday farm fire relief efforts called Sheds of Hope. So our organization, One Hope, helped bring many different groups to the table to respond to the fire relief. At the end of about a year and a half, 74 different groups from businesses, churches, nonprofits, and public schools built 143 sheds and placed them on people's property who lost their home in the Holiday Farm fire. As now we have a continual need for housing, we thought, hey, we can transition that network of collaboration to building cottages of hope. And so last April, we started. We're in partnership right now with Everyone Village in West Eugene, who's focusing in on bringing even further collaboration to transition people out of homelessness into a more productive life. Now, with Cottages of Hope, we've been able to build 14 thus far. They're on the property of Everyone Village. We have plans to put 50 at Everyone Village. We've secured a wonderful opportunity with Lowe's. The cost for one of these Cottages of Hope is $5,700. That's insulated, that's 2 windows on the side, a window at the door, a porch, it's got lights, it's got electrical. They're wonderful little units. So again, 14 are built, 50 are planned, and yesterday, Thurston High School received the first shipment of material to be the first school to build a Cottage of Hope. Now, again, we had many schools build sheds of hope. They actually ended up building 37 of those sheds. This model that we're using with Cottages of Hope really has potential to go throughout the state so that anyone who brings together, it could be a neighborhood group, it could be a church group, it could be a business. You can get together with that kind of group. You could build a Cottage of Hope, whether it's helping people with homelessness or just ADU units. We're looking forward to seeing that multiply, starting here in Lane County for sure. So what I'm asking today is just quite simply, whatever you can do as commissioners and in the county to make the way straight and clear for this kind of synergy and collaboration to be multiplied here in our community and then beyond, could you do that? Could you work together to make the way a little bit more winsome, a little bit more inviting, and not just removing barriers, but encouraging others to join the path? So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reverend Buss. I see no one else signed up in Harris Hall, and Ms. Jones has informed me, Ms. Mokryski, we have no one on the online queue, so I'll ask this. Anyone in Harris Hall, anyone else in Harris Hall wish to present testimony to the Board of County Commissioners? Seeing none, I will close the public testimony and open it for commissioners' responses and or remonstrances. Commissioner Senegal.
Just real quick, thank you guys for that public testimony. I'm assuming these are the cottages that are doing, or they're going to like Everyone's Village, that kind of, those kind of places. Commissioner Lovell and I, Eugene Councilor Leach and Eugene Councilor Groves were lucky enough to go on a tour there with Gabe at Everyone's Village, and he's doing a great job. One of the models, very proud to have in our county. One thing I noticed between these two speakers was the term "win" kept coming up. Yeah. And that's what we need with this homelessness and mental health issues, is we need to start getting some wins. So thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further remonstrances?
Yeah, again, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your testimony, both of you. I got the same vibe from Commissioner Senegal, the whole win thing. I loved what Mr. Dressler said about, at my age, I might not be able to be the fire, but he can certainly light the torch. And I think that's just a great statement for all of us in Lane County. All of us aren't going to be the people who are lighting torches, but we can certainly be flames of light and power with all the things that we're doing in the community. So I think that's just a great call from both of them to call everyone to action. And then further, so impressed with Everyone Village that there is, there's some money coming down here from the governor's order for homelessness, and I just feel like I just want to press this issue forward, that I believe that there's a good set of out-of-the-box solutions and things that are doing winsome work, as Steve said, and I think that we really need to concentrate on maybe reinvesting some of those funds into some of those winsome works instead of the typical channels that we find ourselves putting money in. So I would just encourage us to think outside the box a little further and move the needle where it's moving most effectively.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you both coming out today. we're blessed to have people who are working on these things outside of government like yourselves. So thank you. Government can't do it all. We know that, and we need help. We need help from the private sector to make it happen. And you both have provided some examples of just that, and I'm excited to see where it all goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. A couple of words from me. Mr. Dessler, the atrium, what a remarkable structure that is. What a remarkable service that's been to the government. Everybody remembers DeFrisco's, of course. You know, great place to throw darts, you know, and a good place to gather.
Nike shoe store.
First Nike shoe store right there. But best of all, Prince Puckler's Ice Cream. Their first store is right there. I missed that one in the atrium, but they still have a store. And the city of Eugene, of course, uses the atrium for a lot of its services today. So thank you for your developer with a heart.
Community conscience.
Community conscience is the word, right? I became a Eugene City Councilor in '95, which is about the time the atrium was transitioning to more government service than private. And what a tremendous addition that was. Back then, the downtown mall was there, and the atrium was really the center of everything. That was where everything occurred. So, thank you. And Reverend Buss, excuse me, thank you for your work. Cottage of a Hope, 16 feet by 8 feet, insulated, electrified, and in places where people have access to other sanitary services. They're pretty remarkable cottages. A number of us have seen those in place. And if we compare them at $5,700 to the Conestogas that we use, and we continue to use, they are quite a bit more substantial than the Conestogas, which remain a viable option. But the Cottages of Hope, your call for them, not just locally, but to spread the word, to spread the winsome nature of the project. If anybody who's not seen them, you can pop on Cottages of Hope right online, take a look at the picture, take a look at the outline of them, and it really is amazing the partnership that you put into Sheds of Hope that transformed into Cottages of Hope. Thank you for your service. Any further remonstrances? Then we'll move along with the agenda. Next item on our agenda is a consent calendar. We have before us a consent calendar. All items are considered to be routine by the Board of County Commissioners. Anything that had been other than routine would have been pulled from the consent calendar for separate discussion. And the consent calendar will be passed by a single motion. If you want to see the items on the consent calendar, go to today's agenda online, click on View Material, and you'll see the entire agenda item that the Board of County Commissioners has considered before passing this motion. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar for March 7th.
I'll
2023.
second it.
Moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Lovall. We have today's consent calendar. Any discussion to the motion? I'm seeing none. I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0 with Vice Chair Trieger excused absent. And Ms. Mokrisi will move directly down to something that I'm really excited about. It's Order 23. I get excited pretty easily, but this one is really remarkable, the work that's gone into this in such short notice. Order 23030704 in the matter of approving the acceptance of up to $30 million. Now, if you say that fast or slow, it's still $30 million, right? From Oregon Housing and Community Services Department in response to the Governor's emergency declaration to prioritize reducing homelessness, delegating authority to the county administrator to execute and sign all required documents to receive funding, delegating authority for the multi-agency coordinating MAC group to implement and refine the community plan for submission to Oregon Department of Emergency Management, ODEM, and Oregon Housing and Community Services. Would you like me to say that again? Okay, good, I won't. And Ms. Mokrisi, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your panel and get us started with the discussion.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Of course, we have Eve Gray is with us virtually, and Patience Winningham Melcher, our Emergency Manager, and Kate Budd, Program Manager in Human Services, are with us to walk through new developments. Of course, we're before you regularly to talk about this issue of our unhoused population and the work that our teams in Lane County and our partners are doing to address these issues. And of course, there's been a lot of discussion and action at the state with the new governor and now with the legislative session happening. So excited to report to you today and have a discussion about where we're at in those funding opportunities and partnerships going forward. So I think Kate is going to take it from here.
And Ms. Budd, pardon me for interrupting just before we get started, and maybe I'm stepping on your toes by doing this, but I'm going to introduce Peter Chavan, who's here with the City of Eugene. Peter has been an instrumental part of this discussion as we move forward at this point in time, and will continue to be an instrumental part. Peter, thank you for being here today.
Well, good morning, Chair and County Councilors. Appreciate your time this morning. We are going to be talking about the Governor's executive order of emergency due to homelessness. This executive order was released on January 10th, and it took a few weeks for the governor and staff from Oregon Housing and Community Services, as well as Oregon Department of Emergency Management, to start rolling out information and plan templates to help guide our work. And so this has been very much a quick and rapid process. Certainly not an ideal timeline, though recognize that this is a one-year declaration, and so time is of the essence. Next slide. So as a quick primer regarding the declaration, it was focused on the 7 largest regional continuums of care in the state of Oregon. And so there are 8 total. The 8th continuum of care that was not included is what they call the balance of state, and is the dark green areas on the map that you see there. And those areas are managed through Oregon Housing and Community Services and tend to be the more rural communities. And so they were not included in the declaration. However, Lane County, being a regional continuum of care, was. Lane County is what they call the collaborative applicant for the continuum of care, which means we are the entity that coordinates the required board and also submits applications to HUD for continuum of care funding. And so we have been working since the middle of February to move the state's requirements forward in order to submit a plan on time. Next slide. So with the governor's declaration, there were 3 identified outcomes among those 7 regional continuums of care that I mentioned. One focused on households that are at risk of experiencing houselessness or are houseless but have not yet spent a night on the street, and working to get them into shelter, or more importantly, permanent housing. Also an outcome regarding the number of emergency shelter beds in the community, and then an outcome regarding the number of people who are to move from unsheltered homelessness into permanent housing. And so what you see up here are the statewide outcomes, and in a few slides I'll share with you the local outcomes that the state has communicated with us. The way that we're going to be able to track progress around those outcomes is through the Homeless Management Information System, and this is the database that Lane County and continuums of care across the nation utilize to help us understand what the need is, as well as how we are doing at meeting the need for people who are houseless. And then again, that timeline very much is 1-year period. And so that's the primary reason that things are moving so quickly. Next slide. So there were 2 key dollar amounts identified in the declaration, one being $40 million. And what we understand is that those dollars are currently being held in reserve at Oregon Housing and Community Services. And those dollars would be used to start providing allocations to the local regions, while the $130 million ask is moving through the legislature. And you may know at this point point that it has gone out of a committee, and I understand is in a legislative body being debated. And within that $130 million ask, there are funding allocations for prevention assistance, for emergency shelter, and also for rehousing of people who are unsheltered into permanent housing. And so we also, our community received a tentative allocation of dollars from the state, and that's the figure that we're working with as we move forward with this plan. There were also a few additional resources that were identified that would not go through kind of the regional leaders, but instead would be allocated to tribes across the state, to culturally responsive organizations, to local communities to support sanitation services, and then also to emergency management to support their coordination efforts. Next slide. So this is the local allocation that Lane County received verbally from the state. An approximate $19 to $22 million allocation based on a state formula that includes the American Community Survey, as well as numbers related to the number of people who are houseless and at risk of houselessness in our community. It has been very clear that the state expects these dollars to not supplant or supplement existing funding, and that does make things, a bit more difficult because, of course, there are needs within our existing programs that exist, as well as dollars that will be going away in the next year to 2 years to 3 years. However, these dollars cannot supplement those, as well as it may not be braided. And so, for example, if there are dollars that need additional dollars to create a full program, unfortunately, these governor's order dollars will not be able to do that. The outcomes that we are expected to move forward include approximately 1,600 households who will be prevented from experiencing unsheltered houselessness, approximately 120 emergency shelter beds, and then approximately 230 people who are unsheltered and move into permanent housing. The state was clear that these are not finite outcomes, and that we do have the opportunity to propose different outcomes, though they made it clear that the governor's intention is very much to move people out of unsheltered houselessness into permanent housing, and that we may not declare that we won't do prevention, for example, and move it all into emergency shelter and rehousing. Instead, we may just move, 200 households from prevention to rapid rehousing.
And a clarification, Ms. Budd, the numbers targeted that you're showing on the screen, those are for the state and not for the county, correct?
So these are actually for the county. Yes, the ones that you're looking at right here.
Okay. Got it, thank you.
Sure. Next slide. So the requirements that were shared by Oregon Housing Community Services, as well as Oregon Department of Emergency Management, is that the governor's office is the ultimate decision maker, and they will be working with the two state entities, and that each local region is to create a MAC lead group, multi-agency coordinating group, and that the MAC group must have individuals from these different bodies, so including emergency management, non-governmental organizations, local homelessness agencies, and the Public Housing Authority. And so locally, we have created a MAC group that represents each of those entities, and we have had, at this point, 2 meetings with another planned tomorrow. Next slide. One thing that I will share with this structure that I think is very unique is that emergency management is engaged at every step of the way. In my career, there hasn't been a great deal of engagement with emergency management unless there's some type of literal emergency that comes up, a fire, unhealthy living conditions, et cetera. And so it's been great to have this partnership from the very top to help move the initiative forward and to really be able to think a bit differently about the crisis of houselessness. And so we have, opportunities to follow their communications methods and to also work with the way that they project manage different crises, and definitely look forward to working them throughout the rest of the year as well. So what you see here is the composition of the MAC group here in Lane County. In previous presentations, I've mentioned that our housing authority was not able to join because of other commitments. They have kindly joined at this point and will be engaged moving forward. And then we have representatives from each of these different entities, making up approximately 22 individuals on the MAC group. Next slide. So these are the key dates that were provided by the state. And again, you can see it's a very quick timeline. We received the planning documents that have been shared with all of you during that February 13th through 17th week. We pulled together the MAC group and appropriately submitted that to the state on the 17th. And then we have been working very quickly to complete the 2 template documents the state provided that need to be submitted on March 10th. From there, we understand the state is going to take a week and then approve the regional plans, and then they intend to allocate the dollars as quickly as possible. One thing that I would like to share is the state has not committed to which entity or entities they will be providing allocations of dollars to. So what that means is, Lane County may receive all $22 million, and then we would allocate it out through our usual channels. Or they may choose to allocate dollars, directly to jurisdictional partners for work that they're going to be doing, and they may even choose to allocate dollars directly to nonprofits for work that they're going to be doing. And I do not know what they are planning at this point, but certainly hope to advocate for a uniform process to make things as clear as possible for our community partners. One thing that is challenging about kind of this unknown around the allocation process is that as a part of the plan, we are not providing any type of recommendations as to who would actually be providing the services that the all-in dollars will be paying for. And so there's, kind of a missing component of how do we decide if we're not clear on how the dollars are going to be allocated. So I'm hoping that the state will be providing additional clarity in the next few weeks so that we can then decide how to move forward. Next slide. So to share with you the planning process thus far is during the first week of the MAC group, we did an impact analysis activity where we looked at what are the major barriers to housing individuals who are houseless and those at risk of houselessness in our community. And that helped us be able to fill in parts of the plan template that the state has provided. provided, as well as to identify what are key interventions that we would like to focus on, again, based on the plan template that the state provided. During that time, we also had task groups meet, and these were centered around each of those 3 outcomes that we're working on. And the task groups were opportunities for anyone in the community to come and share their feedback about, what ought to be included in this plan related to that particular focus. So emergency shelter, for example, was an opportunity for community members to come together, agency representatives, jurisdictional representatives to share their ideas. Those ideas were wrapped together, as well as with feedback from a number of lived experience groups that are made up of people who are either currently or have previously experienced houselessness. Those pieces of feedback were rolled up and then provided to the MAC group during week 2, where we looked at the community priorities and then worked to strategize around, what is it that we can progress within a year period of time, which are of the greatest priorities, and which are opportunities that we think will be able to move quickly as soon as the dollars are allocated. We also identified program milestones, and so what are the key, kind of opportunities that we want to call out within our plan, and what are system improvement actions. So, how can we improve the bigger coordination efforts so that, someone does experience houselessness, it's very clear, where do they go to be able to get assistance, for example. During week 3, of course, we're presenting to the county commissioners today. We have shared the same documents that each of you received around the community plan with the MAC group, and so they're soaking that in and preparing their feedback. And then tomorrow we have a meeting to receive that feedback and to be able to make any types of edits that are requested. And then we're also going to share with a number of the stakeholder bodies on Wednesday through Thursday, including the Poverty and Homelessness Board, which is the Continuum of Care Board, and our lived experience groups. Wrap up all that feedback, share it one more time with the MAC group, and then Friday afternoon, submit it to the state on the 10th on time. Next slide, please. So during that second week of the MAC group, the body got together and identified priorities for each of the different outcome focus areas. And so these next slides indicate which priorities were deemed kind of most important to focus on for this year-long initiative. Around emergency shelter and that particular outcome, it includes improving the existing alternative shelters so that they may qualify as emergency shelters. Which then in turn creates additional emergency shelter capacity. Right now there are, villages or communities that just don't meet the threshold. Might be that they don't have access to permanent restrooms, or it might be that the huts that people are living in doesn't have the ability to be heated when the temperature is below 32 degrees. And as a result, it means that they cannot be deemed an emergency shelter by the HUD and Oregon Housing and Community Services definition. And so part of these dollars would go to increasing the infrastructure of those villages in order to allow them to qualify as emergency shelters. Also increasing medical respite beds. So we have folks who are released from the emergency room, for example, that really would heal in a much better way if they were sheltered, as opposed to on the street, exposed to, just dirt and other challenges. And so looking to increase the number of those beds. We have severe weather shelters, for example, pallet shelters in Florence that are used as severe weather shelters right now. And so we're interested in looking at how can we make improvements, including, staffing costs that can be covered in order to create 24/7 emergency shelter there and in other rural areas of our community, if we can find the community partnerships to be able to do that. Also increasing youth shelter beds. We continue to see a growing number of youth that are houseless, and so that capacity is needed, as well as family shelter beds. I had shared, in my last presentation that we're seeing a much higher number of families experience houselessness, and then also increasing existing shelter capacity. So there may be an emergency shelter today that could add a few more beds, and the allocations can cover that. Next slide. So where ahead, I've got two that are homelessness prevention, if you see it, Diana. Otherwise, within homelessness prevention, we are looking at creating flexible funding opportunities for people who, may just need a couple $100s in order to stabilize in their housing, or might be couch surfing or doubled up, and could use, just move-in cost assistance in order to get out of their, their mom's house or their friend's house. Also looking to invest in further street outreach staffing, so that we know that each region of our county is well supported by street outreach staff, and that each of those teams also have access to flexible funding, so that when someone has an opportunity to move into permanent housing or even needs support to move into emergency shelter, those dollars are accessible to our street outreach teams to help that individual do just that. Also, a large investment in prevention programs, so rent assistance and supportive services, recognizing that that's a very effective way to stabilize people in housing if they're struggling because of a lost job or needing to take time off due to health challenges, and then also targeted rent subsidies. And this is a program that was of interest particularly for the rural communities, recognizing that if someone in a rural community needs to move out of their home, it's much more difficult for them to find another home in that community. And so if we can provide ongoing kind of buy down of someone's rent, we hope that it would stabilize them and give them an opportunity to be able to go back to work or increase their income during a few month time period. And then lastly, regarding the rehousing goals, with that, just looking to, again, increase the flexible funding, that is very important in our efforts, recognizing that, sometimes people just need, a couple $100s and then we can get them off the street. And so how can we do that and make it as accessible as possible for folks? And then also looking at creating a landlord incentive package. I mentioned that we were working with the University of Oregon class who are helping us understand what incentives landlords might be interested in, and so that will help inform this incentive package. And then also creating a more formal housing program to help people who are aging, who have young children, or who have disabilities, be able to get back into housing from the street. So the next steps for us is, of course, that MAC meeting tomorrow is an important one, and continuing to receive feedback from those stakeholder groups. Once those have been merged together and needed conversations have occurred, then we'll be submitting on March 10th these specific documents, which also were provided to each of you, and they help to share with the state what our intentions locally look like. And I believe that is everything. Any questions?
No, we have none, thank you. Just to say, as Patience, do you have anything you'd like to add before we step into questions?
Nope, thank you very much. Kate asked me to join her today in case anything came up, and so I'm basically supporting Kate.
Excellent. And, to see you both at the same table, working together on a joint project it really highlights the fact that something that I've heard around the state is that Lane County is a little bit ahead of other counties in terms of the structure that we have in place. Even though it's a short timeline, you've managed to muster all of the resources to get us this far. So we'll move along to questions from the Board of County Commissioners. And the only thing I'll state is the timeline, March 17th. That's a short deadline. I'm going to have a couple of questions regarding how we got to the point where we're able to meet that deadline. But let's look to questions from the board. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got housing and emergency services, two of my favorite subjects, kind of merging in a way that probably was never expected prior to the governor's order. So I find it fascinating how you're able to come together and work on this congruently. This is one of my highest priorities to work on during the year, and I will make every effort to be at as many MAC group meetings as possible. I think this is a place where I can utilize my professional background a little bit more than some other subject areas. And I'm astonished you were able to move as fast as you have so far. And I know that that's just a tight deadline for everybody around the state who's doing the same thing. One of my first questions is, when you submit your draft plan later this week, are you able to see the other entities, sometimes it's more than one county, their draft plans at the same time? I'm very curious if we're able to utilize ideas from other areas. I'm sure they will be utilizing ideas from our area, but if there's a way to see their plans and coordinate efforts, that might be just another level of execution that we can provide.
I think the short answer is yes, absolutely. And I also understand that the MAC groups are going to be brought together statewide in meetings. And so that's another great opportunity to learn from one another.
Excellent. The other, potential issue I see moving forward, and not to always think about problems here, because I'm really excited that the governor is working hard on housing and our unsheltered right now. That is one of the top issues and has been for quite some time, years and years. But I do wonder if we're able to actually execute all that funding within the one-year timeline, noting that the 1 year started back in January. So it's effectively far less than that. And you mentioned that the funding may not come directly to the county. It may go to CBOs or the cities, or we just don't know yet. But are we able to spend it all? Is the MAC group responsible for assisting to spend it all? Because ultimately, Lane County is the one that's on the hook for making sure that we meet these targets. So maybe that, from what I'm hearing, that is not all clear, but maybe you know more that I don't know yet.
No, it is not clear. I think the general expectation is that the dollars be completely spent by January 31 of 2024. And so it's also important to strategically think about how the investments will be made and making sure that the investments, do not have the risk of not spending out by January 31st. And, while the risk is inherent, I think there's also, opportunities to just think through, if we invest in programming versus infrastructure, for example, the chances of programming, being spent out is higher. But we also, the infrastructure is important. So how do we make sure that the infrastructure we're investing in, can indeed be spent by the end of that 1-year period?
And not on ongoing programs, because this is one-time money that we know of.
It is, and that's the other strategy is to, especially in emergency shelter, to look at, how can we improve what it is that we have. And that's at this point where the bulk of the emergency shelter funding would be going is with that focus, as opposed to creating, hundreds of more emergency shelters that we may not be able to sustain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. That eyebrow twitch must have got your attention, Chair. Thank you. I've got
Sensitive to that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I've got a number of questions, so bear with me just a little bit, because you said a lot of information in that, Kate, which I appreciate. You're just a wealth of information. Great leadership under baptism by fire. Can I get an amen with that, right? I appreciate that you're advocating for a uniform process and at the level of focus, which is for the direct the direct step above the street. I think so often I hear people saying that, we have a lot of middle programs that take care of the middle kinds of people, but just that, in my experience too with my own son was, there was no direct step from the street to something. It was always like, here's a brochure, here's a phone number, call, and that just never worked. So I think that is really exciting. I also was super excited when you said that you were going to create some staff for that, which we've always been real short on, a street level staff. And then the fact that you mentioned that landlord was an incentive package. I think landlords have been so vilified in the past that finally we're, mom and pops and people that are, local owned property managers and property owners are saying, hey, we'd like to help, just help us help, So I super appreciate that. You said something about the state providing clarity, and you were kind of wishy-washy about if the state was being clear. If the state doesn't provide enough clarity, do we have enough clarity to move forward?
So I actually wrote an email to the head of Oregon Housing and Community Services this morning, letting her know that I need more clarity, and received a quick response sharing that the frequently asked questions page would be updated by the end of today. And so I am sincerely hoping that that is the case, because that clarity is greatly needed.
Yeah, I love the answer. Check the website. It's on the website, right? Yeah, I always love those answers. The other question I have is, you said there's a trade-off in thinking of these dollars, and that's either we invest in programs or services, or we invest in infrastructure. And I think maybe you and I share the same hope that investing in infrastructure is certainly a way that becomes an asset for the future rather than an expense for the moment. So I'm on board with investing in infrastructure, because I think that's where we're solely needed on the street level of care. So I'm also curious about all of the other people that you've been meeting with just in this short period of time. What's the input are they saying? Are they saying something different now that we've been navigating through this process over time than what they've been saying before?
I think that the overwhelming response that we're getting is an interest in increasing the amount of emergency shelter that we have in the community. And that's very understandable. The strength of emergency shelter is that you can create it relatively quickly, and it does move people from unsheltered houselessness into, having their basic needs met. We are hearing loud and clear from the state, and this we are hearing about, is that the governor's focus is on moving people from unsheltered houselessness into permanent housing, and also keeping people from falling into houselessness. And so while there are investments to be made in emergency shelter, we also need to be cognizant that we can't just create a sweeping change based on the outcomes that the state gave us to just solely focus on emergency shelter. And so in our plan, we are proposing to actually almost double the number of beds that the state recommended we pursue as an outcome because of that high need. But again, we don't want to go, much further, because we also want to meet the state's expectations so that they accept the plan and allow us to move forward.
Yeah, I think some of the programs we heard in public comment this morning was, $5,700 for a semi-permanent transitional house that Everyone's Village is doing, that Lowe's is sponsoring, was a great idea, as well as perhaps using some of the assets that the county has, with properties that perhaps are foreclosed or something, that we could set up dotted centers around our county that we could actually have permanent housing. Because if they're asking us to build stuff in a year, you and I both know that's not going to happen. I mean, unless they're going to put this money in a savings account as a construction kind of a project, a fund, and feed from it from there. So I always wonder why the government never lets us do that. It just baffles me. Anyway, the second, couple more questions. That you said that the houseless would move, and I'm wondering if they would, if our plan is that they would continue to move in a different level, because a lot of the things that you had talked about was taking some of that money and giving that to people who are short on rent or struggling with their house or whatever. Is there a way that we have in place that cycle, when we help them, that cycle doesn't continue?
One of the key pieces of the programming that we're looking to make investments in is that the services be what they call wraparound, and that not only does the individual get rent assistance, which was very common like with COVID type programming, but they also get that greatly needed case management and the connections to the different support services in the community. And so, even on the way over here, I was thinking, I know there's a number of employment focused, resources, but also some efforts through the chamber, and how do we make sure that they get connected into any programming that this effort pays for, so that it is a just clear line between the rapid housing, for example, and the employment opportunities. Because you're right, if someone is served through that type of programming, we don't want them to fall back into houselessness again, and so we need to make sure that we are very much connecting people to the needed resources, and that they know, should they be challenged again, where to go and how to gain that assistance.
Yeah, thanks. I think the thing I've been hearing most from my constituent is just that they really would like the county's focus in the future to not mandate, but at least have a buy-in from the people that we're helping. From the frustration I've been hearing on my constituents are saying that it just seems like we're throwing money at a lot of different things, but people aren't buying in to the process. And I read in a book one time that, two people can't walk in the same direction until they're in agreement. And so I personally and my constituents would like to see us form a strategic plan going forward with all of these monies and dollars and programs we have, that we instill a process of agreement with the people that we're helping. Because if not, my experience in charitable organizations for a long time is we just throw money away and nothing changes. So I so appreciate your work. You're doing a great job. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Zuniga.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I'm very impressed with how quick you came up to speed on this topic and your in-depth knowledge. Great questions. I think we nailed a bunch of that. I do have one question, and I'm just because I've been sitting up here thinking, there's a First Step in Florence. I visited with them and listening to public comment this morning about the cottages and stuff, but they've really focused in on family housing. In this homelessness is a perfect example of that. And you think about how, you've got a husband, a wife, and 3 kids. That the load that is to go stay with friends or family and such. How would this First Step get in touch to try and get on with some of this governor money, some of this? What would their first step be? Because those are the questions I'm getting.
Yeah, and it is a very good question, very legitimate. As I mentioned, not knowing how the dollars are going to flow, unfortunately, I don't have a response yet. As soon as we know, then it'll give us, whether it's the county, an opportunity to share that information, or how to partner. And I'm not even sure if the state knows yet. I think they're grappling still with plan questions. So I will say that we work very closely with Siuslaw Outreach Services, and so just for. Was it Second Step?
First, I think it's First Step. isn't
Okay,
it?
excuse me. First step, for them to stay engaged with SOS, and then also the Poverty and Homelessness Board, because that's where we'll be sharing out information with the general public.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they've been in touch with Bob Teeter, and he's great at organizing those things, so. No, really, great job, thank you, I appreciate it. It's exciting.
Thank you, Commissioner Seneca. Well, it is exciting. I've got a couple of quick questions for you. You know, the governor has, you stated, a focus on moving people from unsheltered into permanent housing. And that's something we've been focused on for quite some time. Back in 1995, Richie Wyman and Abe Farkas kind of guided me through what we called at the time the housing ladder. And it's exactly that. You find people who are in the lowest form of shelter and move them incrementally through all the way to permanent housing. And we have been successful with that through the years. But Ms. Bud Kate, what I see with this is an opportunity for us to weave together some of the partnerships that have kind of not necessarily been in a tight fabric. And a question that I have surrounding that, you've stated that some of the money might go directly to CBOs, some of it might go to other jurisdictions, cities, for instance, and some of it to the counties. In the past, we've had issues with siloing of efforts. And, you know, sometimes duplicated efforts, sometimes efforts that have been a little bit in conflict with one another. And we can cite examples, but that's not what we're here for today. Can you talk about the opportunity to erase silos even while money is being sent directly to the providers? How can we as the county be a part of every single effort that's moving forward while allowing this, this direct source of funding to occur?
So I think the opportunity is that we are indeed the lead for the MAC group, as well as for the three task groups that are focused on those identified outcomes. And so as a result, it provides opportunities to bring together those providers that are funded and have those key conversations. And you know, one really positive thing is that, you know, these are more open dollars. And so it does allow us some flexibility to be able to meet the needs that exist today, as well as those that might be forthcoming in the future. And so regardless of how the dollars flow, we will be bringing entities together and we hope very much to have it be, you know, intersectional within, you know, many of the different supports that those who are houseless may need coming to the table.
Excellent. That's a good response. And really, once again, it's an opportunity for us to work on those types of partnerships that we do have great partnerships with the City of Eugene and with our local CBOs. But you know, more solidifying those partnerships and making certain that we're all pulling in the same direction. All walking in the same direction, which is this stated in the book you were talking about. Patience, please.
Commissioner Farr, if I may, the advantage of using emergency management in coordination with Kate Budd is she doesn't know what she can't see. And in the ICS process and ensuring that we're not duplicating effort and maintaining a common operating picture as well as transparency. So helping Kate, essentially I'm her glorified secretary or her planning chief in the ICS structure and bringing together those policy briefings every other week so that all of our stakeholders understand the direction we're going and they're getting the most current and updated information as humanly possible. Sometimes we don't know the answer and that's just that's the answer we're going to have to hold on to until the state comes through with some of the follow-up information that we're waiting on. You'd mentioned it before, Lane County is well ahead of others in this process. I heard a question about how are we going to meet that goal in a year? Well, this is an accelerated process. We have to work quickly, collaboratively, and make decisions as fast as humanly possible with the information that we're given, which we did in the Holiday Farm fire, right? We didn't have a choice. We had to move swiftly to make those decisions in order to save lives. And by activating the emergency declaration, that's what we're doing here, making sure that all the partners are brought to the table. Everybody's given an opportunity to weigh in and provide information for us to be able to work together as a community to put forward our best effort, if you will.
Well, thanks for that addition. That kind of lowers my blood pressure just a little bit, knowing that, you're helping Kate see what she can't see, Ms. Budd see, and the department see what they can't see. And I'm going to state this. This is not the first time our emergency department and Health and Human Services has sat at the same table. In fact, you live at the same table. So quite often, emergency declarations are in conjunction with our Health and Human Services Department, which gives me a chance to say that we have a Health and Human Services Department. And as far as I know, that's the only one in the county, right? Lane County's Health and Human Services Department, which makes it all the more important that there's no siloing, that we're able to weave all of the services together and make certain we're all pulling in the same direction. I'll mention that, actually, while we're on that, we have opportunities that we're seeing throughout. We heard about Every One Village this morning as an opportunity to add different kinds of, different levels of housing, all the way up to close to permanent housing. But I'd like to talk about one that you and I toured, Ms. Budd, in West Eugene just recently. It's the junction of Ocean and Pacific Avenues. Richard Locke has helped facilitate, along with the city, a community that had been an unsheltered, unsanctioned housing community, but now is actually operating as more or less a community. Is there any opportunity for gatherings like that to help us out with the numbers that we're looking at, the target numbers for Lane County?
So one of the challenges when you have RV communities is that in order to reach that emergency shelter threshold, you have to have, power and sewer abilities to reach the RVs. And so when we turn to kind of deciding which entities will be receiving dollars, we really have to look at, what will help us reach the overall outcomes based on the dollars that we have. And so in short, it could. And, there are numerous different options, whether it's, safe park type of options versus safe sleep type of options, that we'll just have to look at to see, which will move forward in reaching that emergency shelter threshold.
And thank you for that response. That's very, very clear. Commissioner Buck asked, are we going to be able to execute the plans and spend all the funding between now and January 31st, 2024. I'm pretty confident that we can find ways to effectively use the money that's being directed our direction. And one of the big asterisks for me, and I think we can focus on this with the state, is that sometimes the release of funds hasn't been direct. I'm saying that very gently. Sometimes there's been a delay in the actual services provided and the release of funds from the state to support the services. I'm presuming that we can move forward in a more streamlined fashion than we've seen in some cases in the past. That's kind of a question, kind of a statement. Then along those lines, the Association of Oregon Counties has recently reformed the Local Government Advisory Committee, and Director Bell from Housing and Community Services has committed to being at those meetings, every single meeting, and we're planning the agenda tomorrow, on Thursday for the next LGAC meeting. And I will look to your input regarding how can we directly ask Director Bell while she's face-to-face with us, directly in the room, where it's difficult to say no, or it's difficult to hedge, let's put it that way. We'll make certain that Association of Oregon Counties LGAC, which is focused on 23-20, as well as Measure 110 and other things, but make certain that we have that opportunity to talk directly with the director. But make certain that we have that opportunity to talk directly with the director. So thank you for that. A lot more to talk about, but we do have an order before us. We have before us, it's order number, excuse me. I'm on the wrong page. It's on the back side of this. Yes, we're looking for order number 23030704. Do I have a motion?
I have a motion. Chair, I'd like to approve the motion and put it on the floor as a matter of approving the acceptance of $30 million from the Oregon Housing and Community Services Department in response to the governor's emergency declaration,
Et cetera.
et cetera.
Moved by Commissioner Lovell and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Do we have any discussion to the motion? I think we've discussed it in depth. And Ms. Budd, Ms. Winningham, thank you very much for this great presentation. I will call for the vote. Oh, discussion to the motion. No, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0 with Vice Chair Trieger excused absent on county business. Thank you. Big step forward today.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Great job.
All right, then we will move down the agenda to item 7, which is County Council. And Councilor Pettigrew, welcome to the table today. I'll speak directly to you. Do you have any announcements?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. No announcements today. I appreciate the opportunity.
All righty. Then any questions or comments for County Council at this point? I see none. Move along to County Administration. Mr. Mokrahysky.
Just a note that we're immersed in our budget development work. Our departments have all submitted their requested budgets, and I'll be having meetings with departments over the course of the next couple weeks as we finalize the county administrator's proposed budget. The board knows that we are facing some fairly significant financial challenges next year, particularly in the general fund, and so we have a big task in front of us to close that gap with the resources we have available and try to maintain the level of services that the community desires. So that work is happening, and look forward to more discussions about the budget in the coming months.
You think? All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Mokrahysky. Any questions or comments from Ms. Mokrahysky? Then, Board, we do have need for an executive session today, and in a moment I'll read us into executive session. Following the executive session, which will be conducted remotely in our offices, we'll be returning at 1:30 for the balance of the Board of County Commissioners meeting. So with that, at the sound of my gavel, I'll be adjourning, recessing, thank you, recessing the Board of County Commissioners, and then we will reconvene in executive session. And let's reconvene at 10:15 for executive session. Gives us a few minutes to repair. So with that, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with legal counsel concerning legal rights and duties regarding current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.662H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. All right.